The first thing Daniel Hart noticed was not the knock on the door, not the woman pressed to the wall of his hotel room with her wedding shoes in one hand. It was the silence that broke when every screen in the Belrose lit up with her face at once. The television on the dresser, the tablet on the nightstand, his own phone buzzing itself in a slow circle across the desk. And beyond the window, faint through the glass, the great mirrored panel above the ballroom terrace 2 floors down, where 100 wedding guests had turned as one toward a bride who was no longer where she was supposed to be. She was here, in his room. Barefoot on the cool tile, her chest rising and falling, a smear of sea salt drying on her cheekbone. And on all of it, on every lit rectangle of glass in the room, that same photograph, her, radiant, veiled, smiling the practiced smile of a woman who had been photographed her whole life. "Please," she whispered, and it was the first thing she had said that sounded true. "Don't open the door." He should have. Any sensible man would have. But to understand why Daniel Hart did not, why he stood there with his hand frozen on the light switch while the corridor outside filled with running footsteps, you have to go back to 6 hours before, to the ordinary summer evening when he still believed nothing in his careful, quiet life was ever going to change. The Belrose Hotel sat on a chalk headland where the coast bent inward. A white Edwardian pile with green copper turrets and 140 years of salt in its bones. Daniel had come to survey it, not to enjoy it. He was a restoration architect, and the owners wanted to know whether the east wing could carry the weight of a new roof, or whether the whole thing would have to come down. He liked buildings that had outlived the people who built them. They asked nothing of him. They kept their sorrows in their walls and never once tried to talk to him about his. That first afternoon he had walked the length of the east wing with a measuring laser and a notebook, tapping cornices, pressing his thumb into 100 years of paint until it gave or held. The place smelled of hot dust and old varnish and, faintly, of the lilies someone was arranging by the crateful downstairs. Through every tall window the sea was a flat hammered sheet of light, and the heat came off the terrace stone in visible waves. "You're the man who tells us if the roof falls in," said a voice behind him. He turned. An older woman in a housekeeping uniform stood in the doorway with a stack of pressed linens balanced on one hip, regarding him over a pair of reading glasses that had slid to the very end of her nose. Her name tag said Ruth. "I try to tell you before it falls in," Daniel said. "That's generally the useful part." Ruth looked at him the way she might look at a spot on a mirror. "You'll be wanting the east stair then. They've got the whole front of the house sealed off for the wedding. Cameras everywhere. You so much as sneeze in the wrong corridor, you'll be on somebody's live stream in Adelaide." "Big wedding?" "Biggest we've had." She said it without pleasure, the way you'd report weather. "Coldwell girl. Marrying up. There's a screen the size of a barn door on the terrace and 40 photographers who all think they're the only one. If you value your quiet, dear, you stay east of the fire doors and you keep your curtains shut. I value my quiet more than almost anything," Daniel said. Ruth studied him a moment longer, and something in her face softened by a degree, the way a person softens when they recognize their own species. "Yes," she said, "I can see that. Sad thing, a man your age valuing quiet that much." She shifted the linens. "Dinner's till 9 in the garden room. Eat something that isn't from the minibar. You've the look of a man who lives off crackers and grievance." He almost smiled. That was the trouble with people like Ruth. They got in under your guard while you were still deciding whether to let them. His room was on the 3rd floor of the east wing, a corner suite with 2 windows and a view that took in both the sea and, at an unfortunate angle, the wedding terrace below. By 8 the light had gone from white to gold, and the whole headland glowed like something remembered rather than seen. He sat at the desk with his survey spread out and did not look at the terrace, and did not look at his phone, which held 4 unanswered messages from a brother who wanted him to come home for their mother's birthday and could not understand why a grown man would rather live inside other people's ruins than sit at his own family's table. Daniel could not have explained it either, not in a way that would satisfy anyone. 3 years ago he had stood in a room very like the ballroom 2 floors down, in a suit very like the ones the wedding guests were wearing now, and waited for a woman who had decided, somewhere between the church and the reception, that she could not spend her life with a man who felt so much and said so little. She had told him this kindly. That was the part that had stayed with him, the kindness of it. The way she had held his hands while she took the future out of them. He had not been to a wedding since. He arranged his life deliberately so that he was never near one, and now here he was, surveying a roof above the loudest wedding on the coast, with the string quartet's tuning drifting up through the open window like something trying to get in. He got up to close it. That was when he heard her, not a knock, at first, but a sound below the knock. A fast, uneven breathing in the corridor, the scuff of something soft on carpet, and then the handle of his door turning, testing, as though whoever stood on the other side was praying it would give. It didn't. He'd locked it out of habit. "Hello?" he said, and the breathing stopped. For a moment there was nothing. Then a voice, low and rushed and very close to the seam of the door. "I'm so sorry. I know how this sounds. There's a man coming up the east stair, and I cannot let him see me, and I have exactly no good reason for you to believe a single word I'm saying." A breath. "But I'm asking anyway." Daniel stood with his hand on the lock. Through the door he could hear, now what she'd heard, the heavy, unhurried tread of someone climbing the sealed east stair, a stair no wedding guest had any business on, a stair that was supposed to be his. "Please," she said again. The word had a crack down the middle of it. Later he would try to reconstruct the exact reasoning that made him open the door, and he would fail, because there hadn't been any reasoning. There had only been the crack in that one word, and the particular way it matched a crack he carried himself, and the fact that Daniel Hart had spent 3 years being very careful never to need anyone, and had apparently learned nothing at all about being needed. He opened the door. She came in like water, finding a low place, fast, silent, already turning to press the door shut behind her with the flat of her back. She was in white. Not a dress so much as an architecture of it, yards of pale silk gathered and pinned, the hem gray with dust at the front where she'd been running, one strap of a delicate shoe hooked over 2 fingers. Her hair had begun to come down on one side. There was, absurdly, a sprig of something green caught in it, jasmine or stephanotis, and the smell of it filled the small room instantly, sweet and warm and completely wrong for the panic on her face. "Thank you," she breathed, not looking at him, her ear against the door. Thank you, just a moment, just give me one moment, there's a man," Daniel said. "Yes," on my stair. "Yes," she closed her eyes. Out in the corridor the footsteps reached the landing. Paused, a door handle rattled, not his, the next one along. Then another. Someone was working his way down the hall, room by room, unhurried, certain. She flinched at each sound as though it landed on her skin. Daniel looked at this stranger dripping dust and jasmine onto his surveyed floor, and heard himself say, very quietly, the most reckless thing he had said in 3 years. "The bathroom's through there. Lock it. If he asks, you were never here." Her eyes came open. For the first time she actually looked at him, really looked, the way Ruth had, straight down through the surface to whatever was underneath. Whatever she found there seemed to decide something. "You're not going to ask who I am," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm going to ask you to be quiet," Daniel said. "Who you are is your business. Go." The footsteps were 3 doors away when she slipped into the bathroom and eased the bolt across. Daniel had just enough time to sweep her ruined shoe off the floor and drop it into the desk drawer. Just enough time to sit down at his surveys and pick up a pencil and arrange his face into the expression of a man who had been alone and undisturbed for hours when the knock came. It was not a polite knock. It was the knock of a man who owned the building, or believed he did. Daniel opened the door on the chain and looked out at a man in a beautifully cut charcoal suit, no older than himself, with the smooth, unbothered face of someone who had never in his life been told no and meant it. Behind him stood a second man, larger, in an identical suit, the kind of man hotels employed to remove problems without a sound. "Good evening," the man in charcoal said, and smiled. The smile did not reach any other part of him. "I do apologize. We're having a small logistical matter with the wedding downstairs. A member of the party has wandered off and got herself turned around. Bride's a bundle of nerves, you understand. Have you by any chance seen a young woman? White dress. She'd be a flick of the eyes down the corridor, somewhat distressed. I've seen a great deal of white dress this evening," Daniel said. "There's a wedding on. I understood the terrace was thick with them." The man's smile held. "This one specifically, on this floor." "In the last few minutes. I've been surveying a ceiling for 4 hours," Daniel said, and stood back just enough to let the man see the drawings spread across the desk, the laser on its tripod, the general dust and dullness of honest work. "The only thing that's wandered into this room is a moth. You're welcome to interview it." For a long moment the man in charcoal looked at him. Behind the pleasant face something cold and quick was doing arithmetic. Then his eyes moved past Daniel into the room and settled. Daniel felt it like a hand on the back of his neck, on the closed bathroom door. "Might I trouble you," the man said softly, "for a glass of water?" "It's a warm night. The garden room does drinks till 9, Daniel said. 2 floors down. I'm afraid my hospitality ends at the moth." Something flickered. The larger man behind him shifted his weight. And Daniel understood, with a clarity that arrived too late to be useful, that these were not men looking for a nervous bride to soothe. There was no tenderness anywhere in either of them. Whatever was on the other side of that bathroom door, they did not want it back gently. "Of course," the man in charcoal said at last. He produced a card from an inner pocket and held it out through the gap in the chain, and his voice, when it came, was pitched low, meant to slide past a stranger's caution and lodge somewhere it could be used later. "If you should see her. Anything at all. There's a great deal of gratitude available to a man who's helpful tonight, Misty." Daniel did not take the card and did not give his name. "Good night," he said, and closed the door and threw the deadbolt over the chain and stood with his forehead nearly against the wood while the footsteps moved off down the corridor, tried 3 more doors, and finally, grudgingly, retreated toward the stair. He did not move until the building was quiet again. Then he crossed the room and said, low, to the bathroom door, "They've gone." The bolt drew back. She came out slowly, one hand on the frame, and she was not crying, which somehow made it worse. She had the dry, wide-eyed steadiness of someone who had used up crying a long way back and was running now on something harder underneath. "You lied to him," she said. "Beautifully. You didn't even blink. I've had practice being unbothered." He kept his distance, arms folded, the desk between them like a fact. Now, you're going to tell me what I just did, because the man at my door was not looking for a nervous bride. And I've a policy about being made into an accomplice before I've had my dinner. Something that might, on a better night, have been a laugh moved across her face and died. No, she agreed. He wasn't. She looked down at her ruined him, at her one bare foot, and when she looked up again, there was a decision in it. My name is Nora Coldwell. In about 40 minutes, I was supposed to marry a man named Julian Ash in front of 600 guests and a live broadcast that 4 countries were watching. That was him, at your door. Well, his brother. Julian sends his brother to collect things. Collect, Daniel repeated. It's the word they use. Her jaw tightened. For me. For the merger, for everything the wedding actually is. She pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth for a second, steadying. I found something out this afternoon. Mister, I don't know your name either, and you're the only person in this building I'd trust with it, which tells you exactly how bad my day has been. I found out something about that family. Something I can prove. And the moment they realized I'd seen it. This stopped being a wedding and started being this. She gestured at the door, the corridor, the 2 men in matching suits. So I ran. Out the service door, across the terrace, up the wrong stair, into the first room with a light under it. Yours, Daniel, was quiet. Below them, muffled, the string quartet had stopped. In its place, he could hear a rising murmur. Hundreds of voices lifting all at once, the particular sound of a crowd realizing something was wrong. They'll be looking for you everywhere now, he said. Yes, Nora went very still. And there's the other thing I should probably tell you before you decide what to do with me. She swallowed. The broadcast. The cameras. My face was already on every screen in this hotel tonight. The terrace panel. The lobby, the feed. It's how they run these weddings. The bride is content. A thin, exhausted smile. So when Julian's people want the whole building looking for me, they don't have to print a photograph. They just have to change what the screens are showing. Daniel's phone, on the desk, buzzed once. A news alert, the generic kind that any phone catches out of the air. He glanced down at it without meaning to. And there she was. Not the wedding photo now, a different image, sharper, hastily captioned, the word missing stark above it, and, below, in smaller letters, a name that was not Nora Coldwell at all. He looked up. The color had gone out of her face. That's not your name, Daniel said slowly. Behind him, one after another, the screens in the room began to change, the television flickering, the tablet waking, the mirrored panel far below, turning from candlelight to a single enormous face. And he realized, in the half-second before she spoke, that he had already opened a door he was never going to be able to close. No, Nora said. It isn't. And in about 10 seconds, so is every screen in this building going to be lying about who I am. The screens finished changing together, the way a flock of birds turns, and for a moment the room was full of her face, but not the face standing in front of him. This one was younger, plainer, cropped from some old identification card, the lighting flat and unkind. Beneath it a caption had been laid in clean broadcast type, Eleanor Pike, 29, and under that, smaller, the sentence that turned Daniel's stomach cold, do not approach. Contact hotel security. Nora, if that was even a name he was allowed to keep using, did not look at the screens. She looked at him and watched him read them. And Daniel understood that she was waiting to see which way he would break. Eleanor Pike, he said, was my name. Her chin lifted a fraction. Before the Coldwells, before any of it. I was Pike until I was 19, and then I was somebody else, and I spent 10 years making sure nobody would ever put that first name and my face in the same sentence again. A short, unsteady breath. It took Julian's people about 4 hours. You told me you were Nora Coldwell. I am Nora Coldwell. The words came fast and low. I'm also her. Both are true, and they've chosen the one that makes me a stranger who wandered into a wedding she had no business at. That's the whole trick, don't you see? Anyone I stop in that corridor, anyone I beg for help, they'll have already read that. She pointed at the television without turning. A woman with a fake name and a warning under her chin. Every word I say to defend myself sounds exactly like what a person like that would say. Daniel was quiet. The dust of his surveys still lay across the desk between them, the honest, ordinary evidence of the life he'd had until 11 minutes ago. Below the window, the crowd noise had thickened into something with edges. A rising and falling hum, and threaded through it now, the flat electronic pulse of a system being armed. Doors, he realized, the whole ground floor of the Belrose sealing itself one bolt at a time. "Give me the phone," he said. She flinched. "What?" "Not your phone. Mine." He picked it up off the desk and turned it so she could see the alert still glowing there, her old face above the false warning. "This came to me out of the air. I didn't sign up for it. I didn't ask for it. It simply arrived. Because that's how they've decided to move you through this building, through everybody's pocket at once." He set it face down. "So I want to know one thing, and I want the true answer, because I've just told a very calm and frightening man that there's nothing in my room but a moth. And I'd like to know exactly how large a lie I've made myself responsible for." "What did you find?" For a long moment she said nothing. The jasmine had wilted in her hair. He could smell it going brown at the edges, sweet turning to something heavier. She crossed to the window, carefully, keeping to the wall, out of the sightline of the glass, and looked down at the terrace 2 floors below. At the barn door screen that now wore her old name in letters a foot high. "There's a foundation," she said. "The Ash Family Trust. It runs the pediatric wing at 3 hospitals, funds scholarships, puts Julian's mother on a stage twice a year in a nice dress to be thanked. It's the whole reason people love them. It's the reason my own family were so glad." She pressed her palm flat to the cool glass. "This afternoon I was in Julian's study looking for a pen, and I found the real accounts. Not the ones they publish. The trust is a door. Money goes in as goodness and comes out somewhere else entirely, clean, with all its fingerprints wiped. Millions. And the names of the people it comes out to?" She stopped. "I know 2 of those names. One of them signs off on the very inspections that decide whether places like this hotel are allowed to stay standing." Daniel went still. "You're sure?" "I photographed 9 pages before I heard the study door." She turned from the window. "That's what I ran out of. Not a wedding." That, he believed her. That was the trouble. He had spent 3 years reading buildings for the truth of them. The crack that meant a thing was failing versus the crack that was only old, and he had learned to trust the read in his own chest, and his chest said she was not lying. But belief was not the same as safety, and the arithmetic in the charcoal man's eyes had not been the arithmetic of a family soothing a nervous girl. "Where are the photographs now?" he asked. Her hand went, without her seeming to notice, to a slim seam at the waist of the gown, where the silk had been let out and taken in 100 times over its life. Here, sewn in. "I put the card in a dressmaker's pocket this morning because I had a feeling, and I have never in my life been sorry to be right, and this frightened at once." Somewhere below, glass gave a single ringing thud. A door tested hard and holding, and they both looked toward the sound. "My name is Daniel Hart," he said. It came out of him without his deciding it, the way opening the door had. You should know it if we're going to do this. People generally like to know the name of the person they're about to get into a great deal of trouble with. Something moved across her face that was almost the laugh from before, and this time it survived a half-second longer. "Nora," she said. "Just Nora. I'm so tired of the rest of it." The knock, when it came, was soft. Not the owner's knock. Not the collector's. 3 light taps, a pause, one more. The knock of someone who did not want the corridor to hear. Nora was against the bathroom door before Daniel had crossed the room, and he put his eye to the spy hole and felt the whole strange night tilt again, because standing in the fisheye glass, a stack of towels held against her front like a shield. Reading glasses down her nose was Ruth. He opened the door on the chain. "Don't," Ruth said, before he could speak. "Don't do the moth again, dear. You've no idea how thin it wore the first time." Her eyes went past him, unhurried, to the ruined him just visible, where Nora had not quite got herself out of sight. "Ah," she said, "there she is." Daniel did not move. "Ruth, I've worked this house 11 years. Ruth's voice stayed low and even, a woman discussing linen. "I know which stairs are supposed to be empty. I know the sound of my own fire doors being overridden from a laptop somewhere it's warm and comfortable. And I know that in 11 years no bride has ever run up the servant's stair in her gown with 2 of that man's people behind her, till tonight." She hefted the towels. "Now you can let me in and we can be quiet together. Or you can leave me standing in this corridor where there's a camera on me this very minute, wondering aloud why housekeepings come to a room that rang no bell." Daniel took the chain off. Ruth came in the way she did everything, without drama, and set the towels on the bed as though she'd been sent for them. She looked Nora up and down once, the whole ruin of her, the dust and the wilting flowers, and the one bare foot, and whatever verdict she reached she kept behind her glasses. "Coldwell girl," she said. "I did your turn down last night. You said thank you, and you meant it, which half of them don't." She nodded at the screen, at the flat, unkind face, and the false name. "That's a lie, then, that up there." "Yes," Nora said. "It is." Ruth folded her arms. "I thought it might be. They cut the live feed of the ceremony 8 minutes ago and put up a card saying the bride's been taken unwell and is resting. Please respect the family's privacy. 600 people down there patting each other and saying poor lamb." Her mouth thinned. "And meanwhile, every phone in the building's lit up with you as a stranger to be reported. Can't be resting upstairs and roaming the halls under another woman's under another name, both at once. Somebody's told 2 stories tonight and thinks nobody in service is paying attention. We always pay attention, dear. It's how we keep our footing." Daniel felt something in his chest ease by a single degree, the particular relief of no longer being the only person in a room who believed an impossible thing. "They've sealed the ground floor," he said. "They've sealed what they can reach from a keyboard." Ruth crossed to the window and drew the curtain another few inches without being asked, cutting the room off from the glowing terrace. "The laundry stair they don't know exists, because it isn't on the plans your lot were given. Begging your pardon, dear. They never give the architect everything. They never do." A dry glance at Daniel. "It comes out by the sea gate. But not tonight, and not in that dress. You'd not get 20 feet across a lit terrace in 3 yards of white with your face on a barn." "Then what?" Daniel said. Ruth was quiet a moment, weighing something. Then, from the pocket of her uniform, she drew a folded square of dark cloth, a housekeeper's spare tabard, plain and shapeless, and held it out to Nora without ceremony. "You put that over the top of it for now," she said. "It won't fool a camera looking for you, but it'll fool a guest glancing at a maid." And you, the glasses swung to Daniel, you're going to sit at that desk and go on being the dull man who surveys ceilings. Because they'll come back. Men like that always come back for a second look. They can't help it. It offends them. A locked door. She started for the corridor, then paused with her hand on the frame, and the dryness went out of her voice for just a second. I buried a great deal of pride in this house to keep this job. I don't much fancy watching them do to you what they'd have done to me, and smile while it's happening. Then the armor came back. I'll bring a tray. A man who's worked 4 hours wants his dinner, and nobody questions a tray. Bolt this behind me. She was gone before either of them could thank her. Nora stood with the dark cloth in her hands, staring at the door. Why would she? Because you said thank you, and meant it, Daniel said, and because she recognized her own species. It's a smaller club than you'd think. He gestured at the tabard. Put it on. She's right that they'll come back. She turned away to draw the shapeless dark thing over the gown, and there was something in the gesture, the practiced way her hands found the folds of the silk and gathered it small, the way a woman does who has spent her whole life managing an expensive garment she was never quite allowed to relax inside, that told him more about Eleanor Pike than the caption had. He looked away before she could catch him seeing it. The second knock came 19 minutes later, and this time it was the owner's knock. Daniel had the door open on the chain almost before the sound finished, his pencil still in his hand, the surveys spread, and lamplit behind him. Nora had gone flat against the wall by the wardrobe in the maid's tabard, a folded towel in her arms. Her face turned 3/4 away, near enough to the door that hiding her would look like hiding, far enough that a glancing eye might slide right past a servant tidying up. The man in charcoal stood in the corridor, alone, this time. He had taken off his jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled with the precision of a man who did nothing carelessly. And he had brought no water-glass excuse with him now. Mr. Hart, he said. The name landed in the quiet room like a coin on stone. Daniel did not let his face move. You didn't give it to me, the man went on, mild, almost warm. But it's a small industry, restoration, one phone call. Daniel Hart, who tells old houses whether they'll stand. They speak very highly of your discretion. He let that sit. I'm Adrian Ashe, Julian's brother, the one who collects things, as I believe you've been told. Behind Daniel, he felt rather than saw Nora go rigid. There's a woman in that room, Mr. Hart. Adrian said it gently, the way you'd point out that it was raining. I don't need to see her. I can smell the flowers from here, Stephanotis, from the arrangements downstairs. Nobody up in your dust wing has any reason to carry it. A thin smile. You're a careful man. So let me be careful with you in return. What she's told you is a story a frightened person tells. She's not well. She never has been. My brother married far below the family's judgment, out of a kind heart, and tonight it's come apart in the ugliest way, in front of the whole world. And every hour she's loose, it gets worse for everyone, including her. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to bring her somewhere quiet before she does more damage to a life that isn't only hers. It was, Daniel thought, extraordinarily well done. If he had not seen the arithmetic in the man's eyes an hour ago, if he had not felt the crack in one whispered word match a crack of his own, he might almost have believed it. That was the thing he understood. Standing there with his pencil, the story was built to be believed by a decent man. It had been made to a decent man's measurements. That's a very kind speech, Daniel said. You've clearly given it before. The warmth in Adrian's face did not so much vanish as get switched off, the way a lamp does. I'd be careful, Mr. Hart. I'm always careful. It's my entire profession. Daniel kept his voice level unhurried, a man discussing load-bearing walls. You've told me she's unwell. You've told the whole building she's a stranger named Eleanor Pike. You've told 600 guests downstairs that the bride is upstairs resting. That's 3 different women, Mr. Ashe, and they can't all be true. And a careful man notices when he's being handed 3 keys to the same locked door and told to pick whichever one calms him down. He paused. I don't have your woman. But if I did, I don't think I'd hand her to a family that needs her to be a different person in every room of the house. For a moment, Adrian Ashe simply looked at him. And in the flat corridor light, something genuinely surprised moved behind his eyes. The surprise of a man who had expected the speech to work and was recalibrating, fast, to a world in which it hadn't. You've no idea, he said softly, what you're standing in front of. An old house with bad wiring and worse tenants, Daniel said. I survey those for a living. He began, gently, to close the door. Good night, Mr. Ashe. The garden room does drinks till 9. You've 11 minutes. The door met the frame. The deadbolt turned. And through the wood, very quiet, so quiet it was almost worse than a shout, came Adrian Ashe's voice, no longer performing anything at all. You've made this personal now, Mr. Hart. I did offer you the easy way. Then footsteps, unhurried, retreating, and beneath them, distinct, the small electronic chirp of a phone being lifted, and a low murmur, too faint to catch, a man giving instructions to someone else. Daniel stood with his forehead against the door until the corridor was silent. When he turned, Nora had come away from the wall. She'd heard all of it. The towel had slipped from her arms to the floor, and she hadn't noticed. He knows your name, she said. Your real name, your work, everything. In an hour. Her voice had gone thin. That's what they do. That's exactly what they do. They don't chase you. They surround you. They find everyone you might reach, and they get there first. Ruth, my family. Anyone. By morning, there won't be a single door in my life they haven't already stood behind. She pressed both hands over her mouth for a second, and when they came down, she looked at him with a fear that had shifted, widened, and was no longer entirely for herself. I've walked into your life, Daniel. I've put your name in that man's mouth. You survey ceilings and keep your curtains shut, and you were safe and dull, and I should never have knocked. I should let you put me in the corridor. It's not too late for you to be the Mothman again. It's about 4 hours too late, Daniel said, and we both know it. But something in her had genuinely frightened him, not the men, her. The way she was already reaching for the version of the night where she carried the whole cost of it out the door alone, the way she'd clearly done 100 smaller things alone her whole life, and he crossed the small room without deciding to and stopped in front of her. Give me your hand, he said. She looked at him. Your hand, he said again, more quietly. You're about to bolt into that corridor to save me from a trouble I chose with my own 2 hands, and I'd like the record to show I didn't consent to being saved. After a moment, she gave it to him. Cold, he found, ice cold in the warm room, though her face had shown nothing, and he closed both of his around it, steady, the way you'd hold something that had a crack in it and might, if you were careful, not break the rest of the way. She let out a breath that shook only at the very end of it. There, Daniel said. Now we're both in it. It's much harder for either of us to be noble now, which I find a great relief. For the length of one breath she almost leaned toward him. He felt the small forward tilt of it, the wanting of it, the way a body moves before a mind approves. And then Ruth's tray rattled somewhere down the corridor, and Nora drew her hand back, and the moment folded itself away, unspent, into the growing pile of things there was no time for tonight. There's something you have to understand, Nora said, low and fast, stepping back to put the desk between them again, as though the distance were a thing she could hide behind. About the photographs. About what I found. She pressed her hand flat to the hidden seam at her waist. 9 pages. But there's a 10th thing, a thing I didn't photograph, because I didn't need to, because I already knew it the second I saw the ledger, and I haven't said it out loud yet. Not to you, not to anyone, because the moment I say it, the whole shape of tonight changes. And once you've heard it, you can't unknow it any more than you could unopen that door. Her eyes held his. The name that signs off the inspections. The one that decides whether places like this are allowed to keep standing. She swallowed. Daniel, it's on the survey you came here to do. It's the reason there's a wedding at this hotel at all. They didn't choose the Belrose because it's beautiful. There's an honest surveyor in this building tonight, and the man in my ledger is the one who signs off surveys like yours. A wedding, a hotel changing hands, an architect with a clean name brought in to certify it, that isn't chance? Daniel, I don't think you were sent here by accident. Below them, all at once, the corridor lights went out, the whole east wing dropping into a hot summer dark, and from the far end of the hall came the soft, deliberate sound of a fire door being drawn open by a hand that already knew exactly which one it wanted. The dark was not the polite dark of a lamp clicked off. It came down over the whole east wing at once. A hot, breathing blackness that smelled of scorched dust where the corridor bulbs had died back into their sockets, and in it Daniel heard 3 things very clearly. The sea against the headland below, Nora's breath catching against the wall, and the long, slow sigh of a fire door being drawn open at the far end of the hall by a hand that knew exactly which one it wanted. Don't move toward the light, Nora whispered. There isn't any. That's the point. He wants us running. Then we'll disappoint him. Daniel found her wrist in the dark, cold as before, and did not let go. His other hand was already sweeping the desk, the phone, its screen a small, hard rectangle of light he pressed face down against his chest to smother, and the leather notebook of surveys he could not, even now, quite bring himself to leave behind. There's a servant's door in this room. There's one in every corner suite in this wing. They built them for the valets. Ruth said the laundry stair isn't on my plans, but the valet doors are, because your Mr. Ashy's people were given the same drawings I was. Which means they know about the valet door too. Which means we use it in the 90 seconds before they think we're clever enough to. He was moving as he spoke, drawing her along the wall by feel, past the wardrobe, to the paneling beyond it, where the wallpaper met the cornice in a seam a guest would never notice. His thumb found the recessed catch. It gave with a small wooden knock that sounded, in the dark, like a gunshot, and they both froze. Down the corridor the footsteps stopped. For a moment there was only the sea and the far-off oceanic murmur of 600 guests 2 floors below, still being told the bride was resting. Then the footsteps came on again, unhurried, patient, a man who had all night, and Daniel pulled the panel wide onto a black slot of a passage that breathed cool air and old cedar into the hot room. In he breathed. Mind the step down. There's always a step down. She went in front of him, one hand trailing the wall, the maid's tabard whispering over the silk beneath it, and he drew the panel shut behind them a half-second before the room they had left filled with the pale sweep of a phone torch under the corridor door. Through the thin wood he heard the handle of his suite turn, heard the deadbolt he'd thrown hold against it, heard a voice he recognized say, without any anger at all, he's bolted an empty room. He's in the walls, Get the house electrician on the line. I want the valet passages lit. Then nothing but their own breathing and the tick of cooling copper somewhere overhead. He knows the passages exist, Nora said, very low, her mouth close to his ear in the dark, and he felt the tremor she was keeping out of her voice living instead in the hand pressed flat to his forearm. You said 90 seconds. How many are left? Fewer than I'd like. Daniel turned her by the shoulder, gently, until she faced the faint gray exhalation of air that meant the passage ran on. Down and to the left, and keep your hand on the right-hand wall. If it drops away under your fingers, that's the laundry stair, and we go down it whether Ruth blessed it or not. They went into the dark like that, a stranger's cold hand in his, the smell of dying jasmine and cedar, and the hotel's 140 years of hidden work all around them, and Daniel Hart, who had arranged his whole careful life so that no one would ever need him at 2 a.m, found that his heart was not doing the thing fear was supposed to make it do. It was doing something worse. It was steady. The passage let them out through a hinged section of wainscot into a linen room on the half landing. A windowless cell stacked to the ceiling with pressed sheets that gave off the flat, clean smell of hot starch and, under it, the mineral chill of a building's stone core. A single caged bulb still burned here, a different circuit, Daniel understood. The service spine wired separate from the guest floors, which meant the dark upstairs had been chosen, aimed, switched. Ruth was waiting for them with her arms folded and her glasses pushed up into her gray hair, and she took one look at the two of them coming out of her own wall and let out a slow breath through her nose. "Well," she said, "I did say not tonight, and not in that dress, and here you both are, tonight, in that dress." She reached without asking and twitched the tabard straight across Nora's shoulders, a small, fierce tidying, the way a woman sets a thing right, because it is the only part of the night she can control. They've cut the guest floors to the mains and left us our little bulb. Because a hotel that goes fully dark has 600 people screaming down their phones, and that's a story even the ashes can't caption their way out of. So we've light down here and blindness up there. That tells you where they think you are. "Up there," Daniel said. "Up there." Ruth's mouth thinned. "Which buys you a stair or two. Not more." She jerked her chin at a low arched doorway behind the linen racks, black beyond the reach of the bulb. "That's mine." Goes down past the still room and the old sculleries to the sea gate, and it comes out under the terrace where the cameras all point at the water and none of them point at the wall. But listen to me, dear, because I'll not say it twice. The glasses came down, and the dryness went out of her, briefly, the way it had once before. It comes out at the sea gate, and the sea gate has a keypad now, put in 2 summers ago, and the code lives in the duty manager's office, and the duty manager tonight is a boy of 26 who thinks the Ash family hung the moon and would ring them the moment I asked him for it. Then, we don't ask him, Nora said. No, we don't. Ruth studied her a moment. You've a hard little way of saying that, Coldwell girl. I'd wonder where you learned it. If I didn't already know, I'll not get a straight answer out of anyone in this room before sunrise. She almost smiled. It did not quite arrive. I'll get the code. There's more than one way into a young man's confidence, and 11 years of remembering his mother's name is one of them. You two stay put and stay quiet, and don't touch my sheets with those hands. She was gone through the arch before Daniel could thank her, her soft shoes making no sound at all on the stone, and the linen room settled back into its hum of starch and cold rock and the single bulb's small electric buzzing. Nora sank down onto an upturned crate, her spine straight even now. Her one bare foot tucked behind the other, and pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. "She keeps helping me," she said, muffled. "People are not supposed to keep helping me. That's not how the shape of it goes." "What's the shape of it, then?" "People help you once, to feel decent about themselves. Then they read the caption under your chin and remember they've somewhere else to be." She lowered her hands. In the caged light her face was all planes and shadow. The practiced bridal smoothness scoured off it, and what was underneath was harder and younger and, Daniel thought, a good deal more real. "You'll do it too. Not because you're weak, because it's sane. There's a moment coming, tonight, where being near me stops being brave and starts being stupid. And a sane man leaves at exactly that moment, and I will not blame you for it, Daniel. I need you to hear me say that now, while there's still light to say it in. You've a very low opinion of the people who help you. I've an accurate one." Daniel was quiet. He had set his notebook on a shelf of towels, and now he picked it up again, not to read it, only to have the honest weight of it in his hands, the leather warm and worn where his thumb had ridden it for years. And it was in that ordinary movement, with the survey open across his palm to the first page, to the commissioning letter he'd tucked inside the cover the way he always did, that his eye caught the letterhead in the buzzing light, and his heart, which had been so steady in the dark, missed like a skipped stitch. "Daniel? You said a name signs off the inspections." His voice had gone very level, the way it did when a wall he'd trusted showed him a crack he hadn't wanted to find. "You said it's on the survey I came here to do. I said once you'd heard it, you couldn't unknow it." Nora had come up off the crate. "Daniel, I hadn't said it yet. I hadn't said the name. You don't have to." He turned the letter to the light and read it as though he had never seen it before. This page he'd read a dozen times without ever once reading it. The Belrose Commission didn't come from the owners. It came through a consultancy that manages heritage risk for the group that's buying them. "The engagement's signed by the man who's given me every worthwhile job I've had in 3 years. The man who rang me the week after the thing that happened to me 3 years ago, when I couldn't hold a pencil steady, and told me to come and survey a chapel in the rain because work was the only thing that would put me back together." He looked up, and his own voice sounded strange to him. "Martin Vane. He signs the structural certifications for half the coast. He decides whether places like this are allowed to keep standing. And he's the reason I'm in this building tonight." The silence in the linen room had weight now, the particular density of a thing settling into place. "One of the 2 names I knew," Nora said softly. "You knew him before I ever said it. I've had dinner at his table. I've sat with his family." Daniel set the letter down very carefully, as though it might go off. "They didn't choose the Belrose because it's beautiful. You said that upstairs, and I didn't understand you. They chose it because Martin could put a clean surveyor inside it, an honest name on an honest survey, so that when the certification comes through, there's a signature nobody can question standing next to his." He heard the whole architecture of it assemble as he spoke, floor by floor, the way a building resolves out of scaffolding. "That's what I am to them. I'm the fig leaf. I'm the reason it looks legitimate. My grief was useful, a lonely man with no one to tell, and a great deal of gratitude. I was selected." "Daniel." He knew, Daniel said, and the steadiness finally left him, not into anger, but into something flatter and colder. "The whole time he was putting me back together, he was building the thing he'd need me for." Nora crossed the small stone room and did what he had done for her upstairs. She took his hand, cold to his cold, and held it, and did not say any of the useless things. Above them, faint through the building's spine, the guest floors were coming back to light one circuit at a time. A slow electric dawn moving through the walls, which meant the electrician had reached the panel, which meant the valet passages would be lit within minutes, and the linen room's small mercy of darkness was ending. Then, "We don't use anyone he could have reached," Nora said. "Not Ruth's manager, not your phone, not." She stopped. Her eyes went to the phone, still clutched face down against his chest. "Daniel, when did you last have that unlocked?" He looked down at it. And understood. "I looked at the alert," he said slowly. "Upstairs, when it came in. I didn't dismiss it. I set it face down, but I didn't. They push those alerts through a system. The same system that changed the screens." Her voice had dropped to almost nothing. "If your phone caught it, your phone answered it. It told them it was here. It's been telling them where here is this whole time." Daniel turned the phone over. The screen was awake, not from his hand, he was suddenly certain, but from the air and across it, where the false warning had glowed an hour ago. Sat a single message with no sender at all, the letters clean and patient and cold. "You're a careful man, Mr. Hart. Bring her to the Seagate, and this stays a story about her. Don't, and it becomes a story about you and Martin, and a survey that was never quite honest. You have 20 minutes and one loyalty to spend. Choose the one that lets you keep your name." He read it twice. Then he read it aloud, because Nora deserved to hear the exact shape of the trap she was standing in, and because saying it robbed it of some small part of its power. When he finished, she had gone very still, and there was something in her face he had not seen there before. Not upstairs with two men at the door, not in the dark of the valet passage, a stillness that was worse than fear, because it was recognition. "He's offering you a clean exit," she said. "Your name, your work, your Martin, all of it saved. All you have to do is walk me to a door and hand me over, and it goes back to being about the mad woman who ran from her wedding." Her hand had left his. He hadn't felt it go. "And here's the part you don't know yet, Daniel, the part that makes it a genuinely good offer. It would work. I've seen it work. It worked on my own family this afternoon. When I stood in front of the two people who raised me and told them what I'd found, and my father looked at me the way you look at a chair, that started saying, 'It's a horse,' and my mother said, 'Nora, darling, you've had such a stressful few months.' And they let Adrian's people take my phone out of my hand while they poured me a glass of water." Her voice did not break. That was the terrible thing about it. "So you'll forgive me if I'm standing here waiting to see whether the architect chooses his name or the stranger in the maid's coat. It's the choice everyone makes." "I've just never had a front row seat before. Nora, don't." She stepped back until the linen racks were at her spine. "Don't say the warm thing. The warm thing costs you nothing right now, and everything in 20 minutes, and I've had enough warm things said to me by people who were about to hand me over that I'd honestly rather you were cold. Be cold, Daniel. Be the Mothman. It's the version of you I can survive." And there it was, the moment she'd warned him about upstairs, the moment being near her stopped being brave and started being stupid, arriving exactly on schedule, and Daniel Hart stood in a stone room that smelled of hot starch and the sea, holding a phone that had been quietly betraying them both for an hour, with his mentor's signature open on a shelf beside him and a clean way out glowing in his hand, and understood that Nora had built her whole life around this one moment, always going the same way. She had made herself easy to abandon so that the abandoning would hurt less. It was the most efficient piece of self-defense he had ever seen, and it was the loneliest, and he recognized the engineering of it the way he recognized his own. "Give me your hand," he said for the second time that night. Daniel, you gave it to me upstairs when you thought I'd throw you into the corridor. Give it to me now when you think I'll walk you to a door. He held his out, palm up, steady, the phone dark, and dropped now on the towels behind him. Because I'm about to do something that makes the offer on that screen impossible. And I'd like you to be holding on when I do it, so that afterward, whatever else you decide I am, you can't tell yourself I let go first. She looked at his hand for a long time. Overhead the walls kept filling with light. Then, slowly, she put hers into it, and Daniel turned, picked up the phone, and without hurry, without drama, the way a man closes a valve on a pipe that has already flooded the room, he crossed to the deep stone sink at the back of the linen room, where the caged bulb threw its buzzing light, ran the cold tap full, and dropped the phone into the rising water. The screen glowed up at them for a moment, greenish through the water, the patient message still legible under the surface. Choose the one that lets you keep your name. And then it flickered and shrank and went dark. There, Daniel said. Now they don't know where here is. And now the only person who can save my name is Martin, and I find I've stopped wanting him to. He turned back to her, her cold hand still in his. You told me the shape of it. People help you once, to feel decent, and then they read the caption and leave. So I'm going to be very clear, because I've spent 3 years being unclear, and it's cost me everything I had. I read the caption an hour ago. I read the second one just now, the one with my own name in it. I'm still here. That's not warmth, Nora. That's a survey. I've looked at the load this building's carrying, and I've decided it holds. For the length of one breath, she almost came apart. He saw it move through her, the thing under the stillness. The crying she'd told him upstairs she'd used up years ago, rising once and being forced back down, and then she did not come apart. Because she had never in her life had the luxury of it. And instead, she gripped his hand hard enough to hurt and said, in a voice scraped down to the wood, "You've just made yourself into a story about a survey that was never quite honest. For a woman you met 4 hours ago." The survey was honest, Daniel said. That's the joke of it. That's why I was worth choosing. I'll not have my one honest thing used to hold up their lie. He almost smiled. Besides, you'll notice I've drowned my own phone and burned my own mentor, and I still don't actually know your surname, or how you learned to talk like a woman waiting to be handed over. So we're a good deal, more even than you think. I've a great many reasons to be reckless, and only one of them is you. Something crossed her face that was almost the laugh from upstairs, that fought its way up through everything, and this time, for a bare second, won, and then the arch at the back of the linen room filled with the sound of soft returning shoes, and Ruth came through it fast, and one look at her face put the laugh out like a hand over a candle. "Up," Ruth said. "Now both of you." She had the Seagate code, Daniel could see it, 4 digits written in biro on the pale skin of her wrist, where a duty manager would never think to look, but her eyes were on the ceiling, on the walls, on the light that had finished flooding the guest floors and was now, he realized with a lurch, humming faintly even here. The service spine surrendering its separateness at last. They've stopped searching the guest floors. You hear that? The running stopped. That's not good news, dear. That's the opposite of good news. When men like that stop running, it's because they've decided they know where you are and they're walking instead. His phone's gone, Nora said. Daniel drowned it. They can't track us now. They don't need to track a thing they've already surrounded. Ruth crossed to the arch and looked down her own stair into the dark. And when she turned back, the last of the dryness had gone out of her and left something Daniel had not expected to see on that composed face. Not fear for herself, but the flat grief of a woman watching a plan she'd built with her own hands come apart in front of her. The Seagates watched. I got the code, and I got to the still room window that looks down on it, and there's a man standing at that gate in a charcoal suit with his sleeves rolled up, calm as Sunday, looking at his watch. He's not searching, dear. He's waiting. He knows the laundry stair comes out there. He's known for an hour. He let me fetch the code, because the code was always the door he wanted you to run at. The linen room went very quiet. Above them, all through the walls of the Belrose, the lights burned steady and complete. And somewhere, 2 floors down, 600 guests were still being told a gentle lie about a resting bride. And Daniel Hart stood holding the cold hand of a woman with 2 false names and 1 true fear, at the bottom of a stair that led only to the man who'd been waiting for them from the start, and felt the whole careful architecture of the night resolve at last into a single load-bearing fact. There was no honest door left in the building. Every way out had Martin's signature on it. Then we don't go down, Daniel said slowly, and turned his face up toward the light, toward the humming walls and everything above them. Ruth, the East Wing. The reason I'm here at all. You said the roof might not hold. His thumb moved once across the worn leather of the notebook still under his arm. The surveys, the loads, the 100 years of failing timber he alone in this building had spent 4 hours learning by heart. Tell me about the terrace panel, the barn door screen, the one showing her old name to 600 people right now. Tell me what it's bolted to. Ruth looked at him. Understanding moved across her face, and behind it something that might, on a better night, have been hope, and might have been terror, and was almost certainly both. It's bolted, she said carefully, to the one wall in this hotel you spent all afternoon telling the owners not to trust. Far below them, at the bottom of a stair that led to a waiting man. The Seagate's keypad gave a single soft electronic chirp, and this time no one had touched it. The chirp hung in the air of the linen room like a struck bell that would not stop ringing, and Ruth's head came up from her own stair, and for a moment the 3 of them stood inside a silence that had gone suddenly wrong at the edges. That's not the mains, Ruth said slowly. That's the gate lock. Somebody's just released the Seagate from the inside, and I'm standing here and you're standing there, so unless one of my sheets has learned to type, she stopped. Her eyes narrowed behind the glasses. Callum, who's Callum? Daniel said. The boy. The duty manager who'd wring the ashes the moment I asked. Ruth pressed her wrist to the arch's cold stone. The 4 biro digits still smudged there, and something moved across her weathered face that Daniel could only call hope, trying not to be. I went for the code, and I did the thing I said I'd do. I said his mother's name. I asked after her hip. I let him feel like a man whose people are remembered in a house that forgets everyone. And then I did the thing I didn't tell you I'd do. I told him what I'd seen. I told him about the 2 stories. I told him a girl who says thank you and means it was being written out of her own life on the screens he sits under all night. She swallowed. I didn't know if it took. He's a frightened boy in a warm chair. But that chirp says he's just opened a gate under the nose of the man guarding it. And a boy doesn't do that to be helpful. He does it to be seen doing it. He's telling us he's turned. Nora had gone very still against the linen racks. Or Adrian's turned him back, and the open gate is bait. It's both, Daniel said. He heard his own voice come out level, the surveyor's voice, the one that read a wall and told you the truth of it whether you wanted the truth or not. It doesn't matter which. Adrian's at that gate. If Callum's ours, Adrian's now watching an open door he can't leave, because the second he steps away from it, we might come down it. And if Callum's theirs, then Adrian wants us to run at the gate, which means the gate is the one place in this building we must never go. He turned the notebook over in his hands, the worn leather warm from his own grip. Either way, the answer's the same. We go up. Up, Ruth said it flatly. Up is a roof you spent 4 hours telling the owners might come down on their heads. Up is the roof I spent 4 hours learning better than any man alive. Daniel crossed to her, and in the caged bulb's buzzing light, he opened the notebook to the folded plan of the East Wing, the one the Ash's people had also been given, and laid his thumb on a thin penciled line that ran the length of the elevation like a nerve. The terrace panel. The barn door screen showing her name to 600 people. You told me what it's bolted to, the one wall I said not to trust. But a screen that size isn't just bolted to a wall, Ruth, it's hung off a gantry. A maintenance catwalk, steel, run along the back of the parapet so a man can change a bulb or a cable without closing the terrace. And that gantry is serviced from inside. From the roof void. His thumb moved an inch. Here, above us. The void I've been crawling since yesterday afternoon. It doesn't go down to a watched gate. It goes out, behind the panel, above the crowd, straight to the one place in this hotel where the Ashes cannot afford a single thing to go wrong. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The sea breathed against the headland. Somewhere far above, in the walls, the lights hummed their complete and treacherous hum. You want to take her toward the cameras, Ruth said. I want to take her toward the only weapon they've got, Daniel said, and put her hand on it. He looked at Nora. You told me the whole trick is that anyone you stop in a corridor has already read the caption. Every private door in this building has Martin's signature on it, and every public one has Adrian at the far end of it. So we stop trying to whisper the truth to one frightened person at a time. 600 guests. 4 countries. A live feed the Ashes themselves can't cut without becoming the story. We don't smuggle you out, Nora. We put you where they've spent all night trying to keep you from standing, in front of everyone, with the light on, telling it yourself. Nora's breath went out of her, slow and unsteady. And if they caption over me, they can caption a photograph, Daniel said. They cannot caption a woman standing in the light in front of 600 people speaking with her own mouth. That's the flaw in the machine. It only works on people who aren't there. She stared at him, and then something happened in her face that he had not seen once all night. The practiced bridal smoothness was gone, and the hard waiting to be handed over was gone. And what came up instead was simply frightened and awake, and underneath, beginning to burn. There's a card, she said. Her hand went to the seam at her waist. The 9 pages. If your boy Callum can put anything on those screens, then he puts the ledger up while you stand in front of it, Ruth said. And there it was, the plan assembling in the old woman's eyes, floor by floor, the way it had in Daniel's. The proof behind you and your living face in front of it, both at once, on the very panel they used to write you out. She was already moving, twitching the tabard straight across Nora's shoulders one last fierce time. He's in the Av booth off the terrace stage. If he's ours, that's where he'll be. If he's theirs, that's where you'll find out. She jerked her chin at the low hatch above the linen racks, black beyond the bulb. That's your void, architect. I can't follow you into it. These knees have kept their footing on stairs for 11 years, and I'll not lose it on a ladder. But I can do the other thing. Her mouth thinned to a hard line. I can go down to that terrace among the guests where an old woman with a tray is invisible, and I can be standing there, in the crowd, when your face comes up true, so that the first voice that says out loud, "That's the bride, that's really her," belongs to somebody nobody can call a stranger. Nora caught her wrist, the one with the code on it. "Ruth, if this goes wrong, you lose the job you buried your pride to keep." "Dear," Ruth said. And for one unguarded second, the dryness left her entirely. "I've spent 11 years keeping my footing in a house that would write me out of my own life the moment it was convenient. I find I'd rather lose my footing on purpose, for once, and know exactly why." She freed her wrist, gently. "Now go up, before the boy loses his nerve." A turned man is only turned for about 4 minutes before he starts remembering his warm chair. Daniel went up the iron ladder first, into the hatch, into a heat that closed over him like a held breath. The roof void of the Belrose was a cathedral of failing timber, black and enormous, ribbed with rafters a century and a half old, and it smelled of everything he loved and distrusted about old buildings at once: hot dust, dry rot going to powder, the mineral cool of slate above, and the sweet rising ghost of the lilies 2 floors down finding even here. A thread of light came up through 100 small gaps in the boards, the terrace glow rising through the bones of the house. And on it, faint and dreadful, floated the sound of 600 people being kept gently in the dark. "Stay on the rafters," he said down through the hatch, "not the boards. The boards are lath and a century of nothing. The rafters will hold. Follow my feet exactly." Nora came up after him, the maid's tabard bunched in one fist, and the yards of ruined silk gathered small in the other. And when her bare foot found the first rafter, and the whole void groaned around them, she froze completely, her hand shooting out and closing on his forearm hard enough to leave marks. "It's talking," she whispered. "It always talks." Daniel put his hand over hers, steadying, and felt the ice of her fingers and the fine tremor running up through them into his own arm. A building that's silent is a building that's given up. This one's complaining, which means it's still arguing for its life. Listen to it, and it'll tell you where it's strong. He moved her hand from his arm to the rafter, closing her cold fingers around the seasoned oak. "There, feel that? That's 140 years deciding to hold you. Trust the old wood. It's the new bolts I don't trust, and we're going to use those against them." They went out along the spine of the roof void, rafter to rafter, the heat pressing and the light thickening, and twice the timber under Daniel's feet gave a long shuddering sigh, and he stopped and read it with his whole body before he let her follow. Below them the terrace grew louder. He could hear it now as a texture, the clink of glasses, a string of laughter, a man's amplified voice smoothing everyone down, and under all of it the low, restless hum of a crowd that had been told a comforting thing 3 times and was starting, in the animal way of crowds, not quite to believe it. At the far end, where the void narrowed toward the parapet, a seam of hard white light cut across the dark, the edge of a service hatch, and beyond it the steel gleam of the maintenance gantry running out behind the great screen. Daniel stopped there, on the last sound rafter, and Nora came up beside him, close in the heat, her shoulder against his, both of them looking at the light as though it were a cliff edge. "When we go through that hatch," she said, very low, "there's no version of tonight where I'm still hidden. You understand that. Right now, you could still turn around. Go back down. Be the architect who surveyed a ceiling and heard a moth. Nobody's put your face on anything yet. It's the last minute you get to keep the quiet life, Daniel, and I've watched you love that quiet life all night, and I need you to actually choose, not be swept. because I've been swept my whole life, and I will not do it to you." Daniel looked at her, in the knife edge of light coming through the hatch, the dust on her, the wilted flowers gone brown in her hair, the sea salt still ghosting her cheekbone, the woman who had come into his room like water finding a low place and had spent every hour since trying to climb back out of it alone so that no one would drown with her. And the thing that had been steady in his chest all night, the thing that frightened him more than the men, turned over once and settled for good. "I surveyed the load an hour ago," he said. "I told you it holds. I don't say that twice about the same wall." He reached up and, with 2 fingers, drew the brown sprig of stephanotis out of her hair where it had caught and been dying since she ran, the flower that had given her away at his door, the smell Adrian had named through 3 inches of oak, and he held it a moment between them in the white light. "Besides, I've grown fond of the flower that nearly got us caught. It'd be a waste to run now." Something broke open in her face, not the crying she'd used up years ago, but the thing under it, warm and terrified and near, and for one suspended second in the roaring heat of that dark, she leaned the last inch toward him, and he toward her, close enough that he felt her unsteady breath against his mouth, close enough that the whole rest of the night went quiet around the single fact of it. And then a boy's voice hissed up through the service hatch, cracking with nerves. Is that you? Is that her? Oh, God. Come on. Come on. He's coming up the terrace stair. You've got about 90 seconds, and I have literally never been this frightened. And the moment folded away, unspent, kept, into the last hour of the longest night either of them had ever had. They went through the hatch onto the gantry, and the world opened up beneath them. The terrace lay spread 40 feet below, a whole warm summer evening of it, long tables under strings of light. The sea black and silver beyond the parapet, 600 people in their finery turned in a restless golden mass toward a small raised stage where a man with a microphone was still, gamely, holding them together. And filling the whole back wall of it, vast and lit and merciless, the barn door screen, and on the screen that flat, unkind photograph and the false name a foot high, Eleanor Pike, 29. And beneath it the caption that had been chasing her through every pocket in the building. "Do not approach." The boy Callum crouched in the Av booth, a glass cabin bolted to the gantry's end, hemmed in by monitors and sliders, and a headset half falling off his ear. And his face, when he saw Nora come out of the dark, was the face of a young man who had just discovered exactly how brave he was, and found the sum smaller than he'd hoped, and had decided to spend it anyway. "Ruth said thank you, and meant it," he blurted, as though it were a password, as though it explained everything, and perhaps it did. "About my mum." "Nobody. They don't." He shook his head hard, shoving it away. "You've got the card?" "She said you'd have a card." "I can push any input to the house feed, the panel, the lobby, the broadcast, all of it. It all runs through this desk. But the second I do, they'll know it came from here, and Mr. Ashe has a man who can lock me out from his phone in about 40 seconds. So whatever you want on those screens, I get to put up exactly once, and it stays up exactly as long as it takes them to notice. So, make it." His voice cracked clean in half. "Make it count." Nora's hands were already at the seam of the gown. Daniel watched her fingers, steady now where they'd been ice all night, work the hidden dressmaker's pocket open, the one she'd sewn shut that morning on a feeling she'd give anything to have been wrong about, and draw out a small dark card no bigger than a fingernail. She held it a moment. Below them the amplified man said, "And I know the family thanks you all for your patience and your warmth on what's been an emotional evening," and 600 people made the low, uncertain sound of a crowd that wants to be told the truth and is being handed a blanket instead. Once it's up, Nora said quietly, Not to Callum. To Daniel, they'll cut the feed. Ruth said it. A hotel that goes dark has 600 people screaming down their phones. They can't caption a live woman. But they can pull the plug on the whole broadcast and blame a fault, and then it's just this terrace. Just these 600, and their word against mine in a walled garden by the sea. Her jaw set. So it can't only be the screen, it has to be me. Out there. In the light. Where pulling the plug just leaves everyone staring at the bride they were told was resting. Nora, you said it yourself. She pressed the card into Callum's shaking hand and closed his fingers over it. The machine only works on people who aren't there. She turned to the low steel gate at the gantry's edge, the one that opened onto the narrow ledge behind the parapet above the stage. In the full wash of the lighting rig, the one place a person could stand and be seen by every eye and every lens at once. So I'm going to be there. Then I'm going to be there beside you, Daniel said, because I've drowned my phone and burned my mentor and I've nothing left to protect, and a woman shouldn't have to stand in that much light alone. He looked at Callum. The card. On my word. Not before. Let them see her first. Let 600 people recognize the bride with their own eyes before you give them the proof, so that the proof lands on a crowd that's already turned. Sight first. Then evidence. That's how you make a room believe a thing it doesn't want to. Callum swallowed and nodded, both hands white around the card and the slider. Nora looked at Daniel one last time in the dark of the gantry, the sea wind coming up over the parapet and lifting the ruined silk, the brown flower still in his fingers. You know they'll say I'm the mad one till the last possible second, right up to the moment it turns. That's the part that's worst, the believing it might not turn even while you're doing it. Then don't be certain, Daniel said. Just be there. Certainty's overrated. I surveyed a wall I wasn't certain of once, and it held for 100 years. He almost smiled. Go and be the thing they can't caption. She opened the gate and stepped out into the light. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. She stood on the ledge above the stage, small and lit and impossibly white against the black sea. The maid's dark tabard slipping from her shoulders to show the ruined gown beneath, and the amplified man faltered mid-sentence, and a single glass somewhere below rang against a plate and stopped. Then a woman near the front looked up, and put her hand over her mouth. And in the great turning silence of 600 people lifting their faces all at once, Ruth's voice came up clear and flat and utterly unbothered from somewhere in the middle of the crowd, an old woman with an empty tray, the most invisible and unimpeachable witness in the whole walled garden. Why, Ruth said, loud enough to carry, that's the bride. Standing up there large as life. And I was told the poor lamb was resting. The terrace came apart into sound. It rolled up at them like surf, 600 voices going at once, and on the little stage the amplified man had frozen, and at the edge of Daniel's vision a knot of dark-suited figures began to move fast along the terrace wall. And somewhere down there a woman in a mother of the bride dressed the color of a bruise had gone the color of paper. But Nora did not look at any of them. She had found the lens, the main broadcast camera, its red eye burning on its boom above the stage, and she looked into it, and she lifted her chin the fraction of an inch Daniel had watched her lift it all night, and when she spoke her voice did not shake at all. It came out quiet and clear and terribly calm, and the calm of it was the most damning thing on that whole terrace. Because it was not the voice of a frightened stranger. It was the voice of a woman who had finally stopped running. My name is Nora Coldwell, she said. I was going to marry Julian Ash tonight. Some of you watched me get engaged to him on this same broadcast a year ago. A breath. This afternoon, in my husband-to-be study, looking for a pen, I found the real accounts of the Ashe Family Trust. Not the ones that put his mother on a stage in a nice dress to be thanked. The real ones. Her hand went to her waist, to the open seam. The trust that funds the Children's Hospital wings you all admire is a door. Good money goes in as kindness, and it comes out clean, somewhere else entirely, into the hands of people who decide things. People who sign off which buildings on this coast are allowed to keep standing. And when they realized I'd seen it, this stopped being a wedding and became a hunt, and they put another woman's name under my face on every screen in this hotel and told all of you I was unwell and resting. Her eyes came up and swept the crowd, and there was no plea anywhere in them. I am not resting. I am not unwell, and I am not a stranger. Look at me. You all know exactly who I am. Now, said Daniel, low, at the booth. Callum pushed the slider. The barn door screen died to black, and came back not with a flat, unkind photograph and a false name, but with a photographed page of close-ruled figures, sharp and legible and 40 feet high. A ledger with 2 columns that should never have balanced and did, and a heading no caption could soften. A. F. Trust. Actual disbursements. Then a second page. A third, and on the fourth, halfway down, 2 names in a neat hand, and one of them Daniel knew. One of them he had eaten dinner beside. One of them had wrung him the worst week of his life, and put a pencil back in his shaking hand, and called it kindness. Martin Vane. The name went up 40 feet high over 600 people, and the whole terrace seemed to inhale at once. And down at a table near the front, a silver-haired man in an immaculate dinner jacket rose halfway out of his chair, with his napkin still in his hand, and his face doing something Daniel had never seen it do in 3 years. Coming apart at the seams, the certainty draining out of it, the surveyor's own eye reading, too late, a load he could not carry. They cut the feed then. Of course they did. The great screen snapped to black, and the boom camera's red eye died, and somewhere a man had finally reached the right switch. But it was already too late, and everyone on that terrace knew it was too late, because 40 feet of ledger and a bride's calm voice were already inside 600 phones and 4 countries' worth of recordings. And you cannot caption a thing that has already been seen. The plug they pulled only left the garden staring up at the real woman on the ledge, lit now by nothing but the string lights and the summer moon, more undeniable in the half-dark than she had ever been on any screen. There, Daniel said, very quietly, only to himself, watching her stand there while the whole architecture of the lie failed floor by floor beneath her. There she is. He went down to the terrace by the maintenance stair, while the garden was still a rising storm of sound, and he found Martin Vane at the edge of it, apart from the crowd, standing very still beside a table of abandoned champagne, as though the noise were happening to some other man in some other garden. The sea wind had come up, and it smelled of salt and crushed lilies and the sweet green ghost of the arrangements, and it stirred the silver hair Daniel had watched go silver over the best 3 years of his working life. Daniel. Martin's voice was steady. That was the thing that undid him, that even now it was steady, the mentor's voice, warm and dry and certain, reaching for the old shape between them. Whatever you think you've just seen, don't. Daniel said it without heat. He was too tired for heat. Don't do the version where I've misunderstood. I've spent 3 years reading walls for you. I know the difference between a crack that's old and a crack that's failing. That up there was a building coming down, Martin, and your name was in the footings. Something flickered across the older man's face. I put a pencil back in your hand, he said, low, when you couldn't hold one. When she left you at that reception, and you couldn't so much as sign your own name, I gave you work. I gave you a reason to get up. Everything you've built since, you built because you needed a clean surveyor. Daniel heard his own voice go very level, the surveyor's voice, and he let it. That's the part I can't forgive, and I've been standing here trying, because I'm a man who forgives things. It's how I've stayed so alone. You didn't save me, Martin. You sourced me. You saw a man broken open with nobody to tell and a great capacity for gratitude, and you saw that an honest name on an honest survey was worth more to you than any lie, because a lie can be checked and an honest man cannot. My grief was a qualification. You put me back together because a whole man's signature is worth more than a broken one's. He shook his head slowly. You were the kindest thing that happened to me in 3 years. That's the cost of it. That's what you spent, not my work, my believing anyone had helped me for its own sake. For a moment the old man said nothing. His hand had closed around the stem of a champagne glass on the table beside him, white-knuckled, the one physical tell, in an otherwise perfect stillness, and Daniel, who had spent all night reading the hands of people who lied, watched it and knew he had reached the underneath at last. They'll take everything now, Martin said finally, and it came out almost wondering. The certifications, the firm, all of it. Yes, Daniel said, they will. He looked at the man one last time, the mentor, the ghost, the crack in his own foundations he'd been carrying for 3 years without knowing its name. I'm not going to shout at you. You'll notice I never do. I'm just going to go and stand next to the one honest thing left in this garden, and let you watch me choose her over the man who taught me my trade, so that afterward you can't tell yourself I didn't understand exactly what you were. He turned. Good night, Martin. The garden rooms stopped doing drinks. He walked away across the terrace, into the storm of sound, toward the ledge stair where Nora was even now coming down into the crowd, and he did not look back. And the not looking back cost him something real, and he paid it, and kept walking. What happened to the ashes happened the way these things happen. Not in a single thunderclap, but in the slow, grinding, unglamorous way that a building condemned finally comes apart, the people who decide such things arriving with folders instead of drama, the trust's fine glass front cracking across in the weeks that followed. Adrian Asha, last seen by anyone at the Belrose that night, standing alone at an open sea gate he'd guarded for 2 hours against a girl, who had never once come down to it, watching his phone stop lighting up. Julian Ashe issued a statement through 3 different people and appeared in public looking like a man who had genuinely believed his own family's captions, which was, Daniel thought, its own kind of sentence. And the certifications up and down the coast were pulled one by one and done again, honestly this time, by surveyors who had to stand behind their own names, and more than one old building that had been quietly written off as beyond saving turned out, on an honest second look, to be stronger than anyone had wanted it to be. But that was all later, and this is a story about a summer night, so let it end where the night ended. The Belrose the next morning smelled of salt and cut grass and the last of the wedding lilies going over, and the terrace where 600 people had turned as one was empty. The strings of light dead in the daylight, the great screen gone dark and ordinary and small. Daniel found Nora on the low chalk wall above the sea gate, the gate no one was guarding anymore, with a hotel dressing gown over the ruin of the gown, and a cup of tea going cold in her hands, and her bare feet drawn up under her, watching the water do the flat-hammered thing it did in the heat. Ruth had put the tea there, obviously. Ruth had also, Daniel noted, put out 2 cups. He sat down on the wall beside her. The stone was already warm from the early sun. Neither of them said anything for a while, and the not saying was easy, which was new for both of them. "I keep waiting for the moment you leave," Nora said finally, into her tea. "You know the one, where being near me stops being brave and starts being stupid. I told you it always comes." She turned her head. In the plain morning light, with the salt washed off and the flowers gone and no camera anywhere, she looked younger and more ordinary and, Daniel thought, more beautiful than she had under any light the whole desperate night. "It didn't come. I've been sitting here since dawn checking, and it just didn't. It's not going to," Daniel said. "I've surveyed it thoroughly. There's no version of the load where I leave." He looked out at the sea. "I did rather burn my entire professional life to a waterline last night, though, so I'll be needing new work. You wouldn't know anyone who requires an honest man to look at something old and tell them the truth of it." The corner of her mouth moved. "I might. I've a great deal of free time suddenly. No wedding to attend." She set the cold tea down on the warm stone. "There's a thing I want to say, and I'm going to say it badly, because I've spent 10 years being fluent in versions of myself, and I've no practice at all at the true one." She turned to face him properly, her knees drawn up, her hands twisting once in the dressing-gown's cord, and then, deliberately, going still. "You held my hand 3 times last night. Once when I thought you'd throw me into the corridor. Once when I thought you'd walk me to a door. And once in the dark on a rafter 140 years old, when there wasn't a single reason left to do it, except that you wanted to." Her voice, which had not shaken in front of 600 people, shook now, just at the very end. "Nobody has ever held my hand for the 3rd reason, Daniel. I didn't know it was a thing that happened to people." "It happens," Daniel said, low. "It's just easy to arrange your life so it can't reach you. I'm something of an expert." He reached over, then, and took her hand off the cord where it had gone still, cold again, always cold, this woman, in all this summer warmth, and closed both of his around it the way he had in the linen room, steady, careful, a thing with a crack in it that was, he had decided, not going to break the rest of the way, not on his watch, not ever. "4th time," he said, "for the record. No men on the stair, no door to walk you to, no rafter, just a wall in the sun and a man who's run out of reasons to pretend he doesn't need anyone." He looked at her. "You'll notice I said it plainly. I've had 3 years of saying nothing and it cost me everything. I'm trying the other thing now." For a moment she just looked at him. And the sea breathed, and a gull went over crying, and the warm chalk smell of the wall came up between them, mixed with tea and salt and the sun on her hair. "Say the plain thing, then," she whispered, "all the way." "I'm not going anywhere," Daniel said. "That's the plainest I've got. Whoever you decide to be, Nora, Eleanor, the woman who came in like water, the woman who stood in that much light and didn't blink, I'd like to be standing next to her. All of them, whichever one's cold that morning." He almost smiled. "I'm told I make a decent cup of tea, though the evidence in your hand suggests otherwise. And that was Ruth's, so I'll not be blamed." And Nora Coldwell, who had used up crying years ago and had not managed it once through the entire longest night of her life, laughed instead, a real one. The one that had been fighting its way up through everything since the dark of the roof void. And this time it did not die, and it was not put out by a knock or a tray or a man on a stair. It just stayed. And she leaned across the warm stone wall above the quiet sea and kissed him. Once, slow and certain, her cold hand warming at last inside both of his, and somewhere behind them, from a service door propped open to the morning, came the distinct dry sound of a housekeeper deciding not to notice a thing she had, in fact, arranged from the very beginning. They stayed on the coast that summer, and then the next. Daniel took the honest work that came after honesty stopped being dangerous, old churches, a lighthouse, a crooked stone barn a young couple wanted to make a home of, and Nora, who it turned out had a mind for figures that had frightened a whole family when she pointed it at the wrong ledger, learned to point it at the right ones. And between them, they got very good at telling people the truth about the buildings they loved. Ruth left the Belrose the spring after, when a smaller, kinder hotel down the coast needed a housekeeper who paid attention, and she took Callum with her. Because a boy who finds out how brave he is on the worst night of his life should not have to go back to a warm chair afterward. She sends them a card at midsummer every year. She always signs it the same way, in a hand that pays attention to the Mothman and the woman who came in like water. That's the private joke now, the one that grew the way jokes do out of the worst night either of them had, a moth. Whenever Daniel says a thing plainly, straight out, no 3 years of silence in front of it. Nora tells him she's disappointed. She rather misses the man who'd only admit to a moth. And whenever Nora catches herself building an exit, arranging to be easy to abandon, making herself small so the leaving won't cost anyone, which is rarer now, and rarer still every year, Daniel takes her hand, the fourth way, for no reason but that he wants to. And she remembers she doesn't have to run up anyone's wrong stair ever again. On the first properly warm evening of their second summer, Daniel found her on the terrace of the crooked stone barn that was theirs now, watching the light go from white to gold over a headland that bent inward toward the sea. There was a screen on the wall behind her, an ordinary one, a small one, showing an ordinary thing, and it lit her face the way another screen had lit it once, in another summer, when strangers she'd never met had decided who she was and put it up in letters a foot high. He came and stood beside her, and she leaned into him without looking, the way you lean on a wall you've surveyed and trust. "You know what I keep thinking?" she said. "That the whole trick only ever worked on people who weren't there. All those screens, all that certainty about who I was, and it fell apart the second I stood in front of it and let people look." She turned her face up to him in the gold light. Real trouble never quite finds you where you're standing in the open. It only works on the ones it can keep in the dark. Daniel said, which was Ruth's word, which had become his. That's a good line. You should have it embroidered. Ruth would embroider it wrong on purpose. Ruth would embroider it moth. And Nora laughed, and the sound of it went out over the warm stone and the bending coast and the sea beyond, and the last of the day's light lay gold across two people who had each spent a long time making very sure no one would ever need them, and had been wrong, thank God, about that. If this story warmed something in you, the quiet ones who finally stop running, the truth that only holds when you stand in the open and let it be seen, then stay a while by the fire with us. Like this story, subscribe to Adrian Romance Stories and tell me in the comments, would you have opened the door? I read every one. And I'll have another story waiting for you, the next time the light goes gold and the evening asks for one. Until then, be the kind of brave that simply stays.